Hamas and the citizens of Gaza who fought for 15 months, fought to a standstill, they earned a seat at the table. And Trump has created, for the first time, an American president that's created a template that could lead to a genuine Palestinian state in Gaza. It's not a concentration camp. It's not a refugee camp. It's a standalone state rebuilt from the ground up with viable economic. Look, they can tap into that, to the gas off their shore. Tap that in. They have peaceful relationships with the Israelis. That gas can be part of a greater, gas development project that feeds in. Money is derived to them. They can build their airport. They can have airplanes land. They have a port. Ships come in. My God. Did you hear what I just said? For all the people out there saying Donald Trump is a Zionist and Donald Trump's this, Donald Trump, da, 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 I just told you that Donald Trump is the only damn leader that's actually created a momentum for a two-state solution. Now, it may not be the two-state solution that people envision, but I'm just telling you right now, if you think that Palestinian Authority was ever going to get you to a two-state solution, you're higher than a kite. They were created to avoid it. They work for the Israelis. They literally work for the Israelis. So stop factoring in the West Bank. It's politically dead right now. They haven't earned a seat at the table. I mean, nobody has a plan. Nobody has a plan. And if your plan is supporting and embracing the Palestinian Authority, then that's no plan at all. It's not going to happen. The Cairo summit is the Arab world waking up to the fact that they have to do something to change this paradigm. And I think that's what they're doing. They're putting flesh to the bone of a counter proposal. And we have Donald Trump to thank, because if he hadn't put that ridiculous proposal on the table, we wouldn't be where we are today. So Trump said, I'm changing the paradigm. First of all, again, I want to remind you what role, who's not at the Arab League summit in Cairo? Now, we could play the Jeopardy theme music, but Israel. You know who's not a player in Gaza at all right now? Donald Trump took him off the map. When he put his proposal out there, he said, this is about America buying Gaza, America running this. So he took Israel off the map. And then what he was looking for was a counter proposal. And the counter proposal came from Sisi and the king of Jordan. They said, no. We will commit to building Gaza and we'll keep the Palestinian population there. Again, I'm sure we had this conversation when Trump put out that initial Gaza plan. And everybody was just peeing all over themselves in fear. What is he doing? This is criminal. Hell, I did the first night when I looked at it. I went, my God, what's he doing? But then I took a step back and I said, time out. Think. Donald Trump ran on a platform of peace, not war. I just want to remind everybody of that. Donald Trump ran on a platform of peace, not war. So if you think he's going to just willy-nilly go off and have a major war in the Middle East, you're higher than a kite. Isn't going to happen. But he inherited one of the most difficult problem sets imaginable. Nobody has come up with a solution to the Middle East. One of the reasons is because the damn Arabs don't do a damn thing except talk and oppose and all this stuff. And Marco Rubio immediately came out and said, we're listening. The president put out a proposal, and now we have a counter proposal. His exact words. That's what I said all along. This is what's happening. But now they have to put meat to the bone. And so they're meeting in Cairo. And the idea is to make this happen. And what's happening here, let's just think about this for a second. In Gaza, Hamas and the Palestinians stood up and fought the Israelis to a standstill in 15 months and kicked their ass. Oh, Scott, you're exaggerating. I don't know. The Israeli army just put out a report that said October 7th, the Israelis got their asses kicked by Hamas, a major Hamas victory. You know who said that the day that it happened? Me, because it's the truth. Hamas won this war. There will be a Palestinian state. There will be a two-state solution. And that state will be called Gaza. Gaza will be rebuilt from the ground up. It will become a viable Palestinian homeland, not a concentration camp, not a refugee camp. They're not building a refugee camp. They're building a nation for the Palestinian people, a state for the Palestinian people. I think politically we'll find out that the leadership will not be called Hamas, but it will be heavily influenced by Hamas because that's the reality of it. And we see the structures in place for that. The Russians have already taken the lead to take 14 separate factions, turn them into a singularity. The Chinese picked up and ran with it. Russia, China, the United States, that's the big three. Now the Arabs coming in funding it. Let's also look what's happening. West Bank. What's the difference between West Bank and Gaza? Besides obvious geographic. The West Bank, I'm sorry, Palestine. You allowed Abu Mazen to become the head of the Palestinian administration, the most corrupt man in Palestine. There's nothing to fight for, and nobody's fighting for it. I know I'm not happy with that, what happened in Jenin and all that, but the reality is the West Bank is going to be whittled down by the Israelis into nothing. And it needs to happen because the Palestinian Authority isn't worth defending. And so what's going to happen is that the West Bank is going to be carved up, and there might be some little fiefdoms there, little Zulu lands, to use the South African apartheid thing. But the big player is going to be Gaza, rebuilt, reimagined as a Palestinian state. Now, if the Palestinians want to rise up and fight a second big battle in Gaza, or in West Bank, equivalent to what happened in Gaza, and fight the Israelis to a standstill and earn the right to have a Palestinian state as part that comprises the West Bank, do it. But they're not willing to do that. We're looking at a new situation in the Middle East where we don't have an America that's facilitating Israel's, irresponsible muscle flexing. Again, I just remind people that Donald Trump, there's a reason why Trump posted Jeffrey Sachs's condemnation of Netanyahu, because Trump knows that the nation that gets us involved in these wars is Israel. And Israel's the problem, not the solution. But he has to play the game smart. So how does he play the game? He stacks his administration with Zionists. How can you, if you're Israeli, you're like, yeah, this is good stuff. And then once he stacks it, he sends Steve Witkoff to tell Netanyahu to sit down and shut up. Suddenly those Zionists just didn't matter anymore, did they? And, when the Zionists put pressure and Israel goes, we're going to stop the supply of food to Gaza on Ramadan, and that could break up the ceasefire. What happened? 2 days later, Netanyahu was told, open the damn borders, sit down and shut up. We're not letting you do this. So what the Russians are saying is, hey, Trump, now that we've built this trust on Ukraine, trust us. We can help you here too. That'd be a tough thing for Russia to sell if the Ukraine conflict was still going on. But now we're developing firm diplomatic relations between Russia across the entire spectrum. And I can guarantee you that the Russian Iran desk and the American Iran desk are going to be talking about how we can get this thing on the path. And why is it going to work? Because Donald Trump doesn't want a war. I don't know how many times I have to say that to people. He doesn't want a war. He wants peace. And he's willing to do what's necessary to achieve that peace. This isn't the Biden administration. This is a Trump administration. They don't want war. But if Iran provokes a war by attacking Israel with massive military barrages, then the United States will take Iran off the map. Now, we'll pay a price in the Middle East, oil infrastructure, et cetera. But Russia understands this. Look at the security agreement that Russia set up. The Russians are the smartest people out there, just so you know that. They think strategically. That security agreement had Russia building nuclear power plants in Iran and providing the nuclear fuel for it. Why? It de-emphasizes Iran's need for an indigenous nuclear fuel manufacturing base, which now creates the opportunity for Iran to negotiate it away as part of an eventual deal with the United States. Now, Iran's going through some interesting political times right now, where there's a purge taking place of its of the liberal faction, and the president appears to be isolated. But I just think this is a knee-jerk reaction by the conservatives. But the reality is, and the Supreme Leader will, I think, already recognize, there can be no war with Israel. There can be no war with Israel. That's just not the route. And the Russians are saying that. And the United States will work with Russia to achieve a lasting agreement with the Iranians. That's how I see this happening. I see the Chinese playing an important role in this as well. So, we have a new administration in town, and they're just not going to let this game happen. They're not going to let Israel provoke a fight with Iran. And so that's why I said, under these circumstances now, if Iran wants to implement Operation True Promise 3, it's not because they care about Gaza. It's because they're looking for a fight with Israel. Trump's killing the establishment, destroying it, not reshaping it, not reshuffling it, destroying it, leveling it down to the foundation and even more. You don't do that with Republicans. So he picked JD, and I said that. I don't know if I said it on your show, but I told everybody straight up, he'll pick JD Vance because this is the MAGA revolution. They were like, no, it's not. It's a blip. Right. We're looking at 12 to 20 years of MAGA control of Washington, D.C. That's what's happening here. When Donald Trump was considering his vice presidential candidates, I think the final three were two governors and JD Vance. The two governors were Republican governors. JD Vance is MAGA. This is a Make America Great Again revolution that's taking place. Now, if Trump had picked a Republican, that's the end of the revolution, because literally what you just said is all we have to do is wait 4 years and then the establishment would come back in. Marco Rubio wasn't. Marco Rubio, let's be honest. Donald Trump took $100 million from Miriam Adelson, and that was supposed to buy Marco Rubio as the vice president. And Trump said, that's just not going to happen. And so Miriam said, well, he has to be in somewhere. And so he's in as Secretary of State. You want to see the power dynamic, look at the video of J.D. Vance talking, gesturing, the comfort, and Marco Rubio just sitting there passively and quiet. He has one job and one job only, and that's to do what Donald Trump tells him to do. And look how he's changed. Is this really the same Marco Rubio that we saw a year ago talking about Russia? Vladimir Putin is an evil dictator, a brutal dictator. Russia can't be trusted. Today it's like, no, we're going to sit down. We're going to have good relations with the Russians. We're going to do this. We're normalizing relations. I mean, Marco Rubio just said, okay, I'm going to do my job. Donald Trump sent the signal. He's not about military confrontation. He's about economic cooperation. And that's the direction that we're heading. And Marco Rubio is going to be the compliant tool to make it happen. And in 2 years, when Marco Rubio becomes fed up with it, either he has to conform totally, or he's going to be like, then he's going to pop out. Then Marco Rubio, because he'll become like Nikki Haley, who made it to the ambassadorship of the United Nations and then left and then spent 2 years stabbing Donald Trump in the back, campaigning against him. And Marco Rubio would come out, pull up Mike Pompeo or, a John Bolton. We were against it the whole time. This is bad policy. This was stupid. I can't believe it. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are going to crush him, and they'll roll into 2028, and J.D. Vance will be the presidential candidate, and he's going to win. That's 4 years. He's going to pick a brilliant vice presidential candidate. Maybe that person's name is Tulsi Gabbard, and then Tulsi Gabbard will be the president, and that's 20 years. Last time I checked, 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 4 is 20. And right now he's got a little bit of a leash on China. Mark my words. When it comes time to engage with China, Marco Rubio is going to shut up and start singing a whole different tune. No, the foundation of our, relationship with China is economic. We're going to meet with them. There's going to be great economic deals done and all that stuff. You're going to see Trump meeting with Putin, meeting with Xi, meeting with Modi, the big four. And that BRICS, far from being dead, is going to become one of the most relevant forums for the United States. Not that we're going to become a BRICS member, but that we're going to work with BRICS as opposed against BRICS, that we're going to redefine our focus in the world on the global South, not on the transatlantic relationship, not on World War II era Pacific relationships. We're not going to let North Korea and South Korea define our military posture in the Pacific. We're not going to let Japan define that either. We're going to seek peace. We're going to seek the settlement. Trump has said he wants to bring up denuclearization of North Korea again. That's one of his goals and objectives. He's not doing this because he's looking for a war with China. He's doing this because he's looking for peace and stability with China. It's a more difficult question because China comes in with a very strong hand. People have talked about his approach towards Russia being one of seeking to put a wedge between Russia and China. I think it's the exact opposite. I think Trump knows that Putin has Xi's ear, and that what Trump is going to do is go to Putin and say, "Come on, man, tell Xi he's got to work with me. We're trying to look. I proved that I'm willing. Hell, I brought NATO down. I did everything to create stability. I need the Chinese to trust me as well. I need some good faith effort on the part of China, not to feel threatened by it. I am not the Biden administration. I'm not the old Trump administration. This is revolutionary Trump." So I think BRICS is a perfect forum where these sensitivities have already been addressed. There's balances being done. And I think you're going to see the United States working with China, Russia, and India to make the global South an ally of America, not the adversary of America. This is the strategic direction I see the United States heading in. It's more than a 4-year program, I can tell you that much. And so to have any success of this, Trump has to convince the world, the Russians, the Chinese, that A, he will be consistent in his 4 years, and B, he is creating a domestic political imperative in the United States where whoever replaces him will sustain this trajectory. Because it doesn't work to talk about all these sweeping changes only 4 years from now, to have Trump go down, Biden-type Democrats come back in and return it. That no one's going to do business. And I think that's the direction he's heading with Russia, not to divide China and Russia, but actually to use Russia to help China and America become better, economic collaborators. And this has to include India, because you can't isolate India. India is very afraid of American-Chinese collaboration of that sort because it would isolate. And that MAGA will be the movement that defines America for the next 12 to 20 years. And that gives all these nations a window to say, okay, we can work with America and we can solidify a new world order, so to speak, so that when the post-MAGA movement comes in, because America will be great already, so you don't have to make it great again. If maybe it would be called "We Made America Great," but that movement won't be seeking to change this. It'll be seeking to sustain it. This will become the new international rules-based order, except it's not going to be an international rules-based order. It's going to be something bigger and better, but that will become the foundation of our national security strategy, similar to what Biden said the international rules-based order is the foundation. Well, Trump's killing that. We're going to redefine something so that America, Democrat, Republican, MAGA, or whatever the hell the Democrats end up calling themselves, they say sustaining this is essential for us. And this could define our relationship with the world for the next 80 to 100 years, just like the transatlantic relationship defined our relationship with the world from the end of the Second World until today. Things change. Nothing's forever. Who knows what the world's going to be in 100 years? But it'd be nice, at least projecting forward, that we're not projecting forward 100 years, held down by the anchor of an 80-year-old relationship, the transatlantic relationship, that's just about war. That has to end. That has to be finished, and we have to move on. And I think Trump can get the credit that he deserves. I think he has a vision. I think his vision is it is predicated on America being great again, but it's also a realistic vision about the state of the world. I mean, my God, when were we going to hear an American president say straight up, NATO expansion caused the conflict in Ukraine and that Russia isn't the threat, Europe's the threat? That's the truth. Trump's trying to make peace with Russia. The Russia House and the CIA is not about peace with Russia. It's about Cold War mentality, war with Russia. You think he's going to let them stay on? Tulsi Gabbard's up there sharpening the knives right now. They're going to have a field day. Bring them in. Dead, dead, dead. It's over for the establishment. Finished. До свидания. Probably shouldn't use that word because it brings up a Russia connection and people say, see, the Russians are controlling this altogether. So we'll say auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, hasta luego. It's over. And in the meantime, the Democratic Party ceases to exist. And they're going to have to, it's already dead. There's no Democratic Party. It's dysfunctional. My God, they're talking about Crockett being a candidate. Have you seen her? Crockett, the representative from Texas, who is just hate-filled, bile-filled. Kamala Harris is right now she has the inside track for the nomination. Kamala Harris, who couldn't, I guarantee you, if Kamala Harris runs for president and goes through what do they call it? She'll be out in the first month because she's the most hateful, despicable, disgusting politician out there. Crockett might stay on for entertainment, but she'll be out. The Democrats have nobody. And it's going to get worse for them. I just want to remind you again, we're 1 month into the MAGA revolution. The Democrats are already decapitated. They've got nothing going for them. They can't stop any of this. They've tried all their tricks. There are no tricks to be played. Trump had 4 years of lawfare to learn all this, learn where the weak points are. And he's taken them down one by one. All the FBI agents that went after him, all 6,000 of them, unemployed, baby. Every U.S. attorney that was out there playing these games, they're gone. The head of the New York field office, I mean, one of the most powerful jobs in the FBI. If you're talking about Mr. Establishment, gone. They're all gone. And it's just 1 month. Wait till he turns his attention on the Russia House and the CIA and those 30-year veterans who think they know everything about Russia but don't know anything about Russia, who've been pushing bad policy. Just think what I've just said. I mean, Trump, I've told you this before. Go back to The Apprentice. If you want to know about Donald Trump, watch The Apprentice and watch how he'd operate. J.D. Vance is passing every test. Donald Trump threw him into come on, that was high visibility, high stakes tagging in there at the White House. J.D. Vance could have fumbled that. Donald Trump was testing him. And J.D. Vance passed. He sent him to Munich and said, hey, J.D., why don't you go to Europe and piss everybody off? And J.D. Vance went to Europe and pissed everybody off. Came back and he's a frickin' hero. Then he went to the White House, destroyed Zelensky. He's a hero. J.D. Vance is probably one of the most competent political figures out there because he understands what's happening. He understands his role. He's not here to kiss up to the establishment. He's here to destroy the establishment. And he's a Marine, so he knows a little bit about destroying things. The Democrats are finished. And J.D. Vance is the guy that's going to be leading America going forward. That's my take. He was handpicked by Donald Trump because he is MAGA. And he's proven himself. So, yeah, I think J.D. Vance is a brilliant pick, and I think he's doing a brilliant job, and I think he has a long political career ahead of him. When I was when I was with NBC News, I remember I worked with. They had a correspondent in the White House. I can't remember, Claire Shipman maybe. And every Sunday, these people would gather in the White House to get a briefing from the National Security Advisor, who at that time was Sandy Berger, and it would be off the record. So they would say an unnamed White House official. But the purpose of the briefing that time was for the White House to set the tone of the news cycle for the week. So the National Security Advisor comes out and throws stories out there. And then those stories get picked up, covered, and then on Monday they get a bigger story, a follow-up story on Wednesday. By Friday, talk about it. And then on next Sunday, they're doing the wrap-up on the Sunday talk shows. And then Sandy Berger holds another briefing. And that way the government controls the news cycle. And at that time, this was right in the aftermath of Operation Desert Fox, the whole case that the United States was making about WMD. And I said, hey, I can get you to expose Sandy Berger as a liar in 3 questions. You just have to ask the questions in sequence, and he'll be exposed as a liar. And they did. At the end of the 3rd question, he stopped Shipman. He said, I know that Scott Ritter works for NBC News, and I know he's responsible for these questions. If you ever use Scott Ritter again, you'll be kicked out of this pool. And when it was reported back to me, I was like, boom, we just got Sandy Berger, because of course, freedom of the press is the most important thing in America. My God, NBC is going to lead the charge. We're taking down the Clinton White House. Boom, boom, boom. I was fired the next week. Fired the next week. And that's when I knew that the media was never about telling the truth, never about honesty. It was always about the hand in glove relationship they had with the U.S. government and corporate money. That's the way it is, man. It's time to bring it to an end. And that's what's happening here. This corruption is from the bottom to the top. And the mainstream media was disguising it because they were part of the corruption. Every single one of them. At some point in time, they forgot what it meant to be a journalist. And they started becoming a slave of corporate interests. And corporate interests are part of the corruption because they work hand in glove. If you worked in the government, you were working to sustain corruption. Literally. One way or another, you're sustaining corruption. So yeah, you lose your job. Does that mean that there's no need for government? No. But it does mean that maybe 9 out of 10 jobs that we were funding with American taxpayer money shouldn't be funded. Maybe it means entire administrations need to be done away with. Because what are they doing? You know, there were schools in America before the Department of Education. So the Department of Education doesn't actually equate to better educated Americans. In fact, since the Department of Education's come in, the quality of education in America has plummeted dramatically. Now, I'm not saying there's a cause-effect relationship. I am saying that obviously that's not the solution. So then you have to ask yourself, why is the Department of Education there? What are they accomplishing? Why are we spending this money on it? Well, maybe it's part of an establishment designed to take control, to manipulate, to sustain, to enrich. You know, we're finding out a lot of this money went down to the wives of people who headed up a non-governmental organization to teach, Afghan women, the benefits of erotic art or something like that. Literally, there's something like that taking place. Millions of dollars being allocated, but they can't go to Afghanistan because it's shut down, but they still receive the money. Every year the check goes out. It's deposited and nobody asks any question. What's happening? And then you find out that this organization, just one person, the wife of somebody who has a 70% overhead. So you give her $1 million, she puts $700,000 in her pocket, she sits back and does nothing. That is the entire way the system works. Donald Trump, I think he does need to bring clarity to what's going on in Europe. Maybe he doesn't want to play too many cards, but I mean, he's announced that he's going to make some big announcements here. So I think the big ones are, the big directions that he could head into are the unplugging from Europe and the, promotion of the reality of U.S.-Russian relations, that this is a strategic direction. I don't know if he's ready to make that statement yet, but that's the direction we're heading. We're heading away from the time when the transatlantic relationship defined America in the world. And we are jettisoning this transatlantic relationship, and we are moving to a bigger stage. That's really the rest of the world. I loved it. I saw somebody, maybe it was Tusk, the Polish president. I can't believe that 500 million people are looking to 300 million people to help them defend themselves against 140 million people, meaning 500 million, the population of Europe, and the 300 million, that's America, and the 140 million is Russia. And that's his focus. And I would say, I think it's going to be the 300 million people sitting down with 140 million people, sitting down with 1.8 billion people, sitting down with another 1.8 billion people. And suddenly the math of Europe doesn't matter anymore. That you've made. First of all, you can't speak of 500 million Europeans. That implies singularity. There is no singularity. We have to speak about, what's the population of Poland? 38 million, 36 million, population of Germany. So suddenly that 500 million gets fractured. And we saw the fracturing. Giorgio Meloni, we ain't playing that stupid game. Well, so it's 500 million minus the population of Italy. Wait a minute. Others are saying they're not playing well. 500 million minus this. And suddenly you find out that there's nothing in Europe. That's why Europe has to turn to 300 million to defend against 140 million, because Europe is nothing. They can agree on nothing. They stand for nothing. That's the reality of it. I believe that, everybody keeps saying, well, it's the United States and Europe, that Europe gets a seat. I think Europe's actually being told that you've been permanently relegated to the children's table in the back. The children's table I'm talking about, when all your friends come over and you're going to have the adult table, and then all the kids go in the back so that their noise in their games doesn't bother you. Europe's no longer at the adult table. Europe's at the children's table. And that the adult table is, right now it seats 4. It seats Trump, it seats Putin, it seats Xi Jinping, and it seats Modi. That's it. That's the adult table. If I were the president, I would be putting Europe on notice that the United States has made a strategic shift towards peace with Russia, that's our goal and our objective. And then I would say that the United States, from this peace, we will then move towards, we are going to be pivoting towards the Pacific, and the question of China and how we can learn to peacefully coexist with China. That would be the ideal. But to do that, we have to have a solid. We can't have a foundation around the world that's predicated on conflict. So the conflict between Europe and Russia has to come to an end. The conflicts in the Middle East have to come to an end. Donald Trump recognizes that the conflict that's ongoing in Ukraine, which is a little more than a proxy conflict between the West, which includes the United States, NATO, European Union, using Ukraine as the proxy, and Russia, that this conflict could lead to World War III and a nuclear war. That's the end of all life on the planet. And that's without the concept of a nuclear war. I mean, Ukraine is the single most corrupt nation on the planet. Zelensky is the single most corrupt leader on the planet. Let's not forget that Seymour Hersh, who I respect greatly, wrote a while back that, William Burns, the director of the CIA, had to travel on orders of Joe Biden to Ukraine early on, not to hold his hand and tell him how much. He said, stop being so corrupt. Quit taking so much money. It's becoming too obvious. We can't hide this anymore. Okay, when the director of the CIA has to go to Ukraine and tell the president of Ukraine to stop stealing money, it's becoming an embarrassment for the United States. You have a problem. And yet the entire mainstream media, who knows all about his corruption, they know this. They just choose to play the stupid game. And then all the people on social media pretending, all the government officials posturing. This isn't about them playing, social media games and posturing and all that. This is about life and death of the entire world. And I think sometimes people lose track of that when they talk about this, especially the people that fly the Ukrainian flag next to their name on their social media accounts as though they're somehow morally superior to everybody else. And so what's happening with this shutting down of the military aid, it's attached to a larger problem of Ukraine and NATO and the European Union. I just want to, again, remind people, because sometimes people tend to forget these things, even though they're right in their face. You do know, and J.D. Vance brought this up in the White House meeting, that Zelensky campaigned on behalf of the Biden administration to lead up to the November election, that he went on a campaign trip. He got, he went up to Scranton, had some artillery shells autographed in a very disgusting manner by the governor of Pennsylvania, a Democrat. And he actively advocated for the victory of the Biden administration, basically saying that Donald Trump was a threat. But it wasn't just that. After his November election, Zelensky, NATO, the European Union all conspired with the Biden administration to Trump-proof their policies. That's straight up saying that they are conspiring against the president of the United States. Even though Biden was the president, we know who was going to be president. We know what their policies are. So if you're trying to Trump-proof it, you're saying that you're advocating in direct opposition to the policy direction that Donald Trump wants to take America. In short, you've become the enemy of America. I don't know if you know anything about Donald Trump, but he has an ego, he has thin skin, and he's vindictive as hell, and his memory's like an elephant. You think he's going to forget that? The West may have forgotten that. The media may have ignored it. Donald Trump hasn't forgotten that, as obvious as made obvious by J.D. Vance's bringing it up. And for the first time, we have an official in the United States that's willing to state the obvious. Russia's been right the whole time. All this Russophobic nonsense, Russiagate, Russia. It's just been a Democratic lie, straight up lie. There's no aspect of truth to anything they've said. And that's just becoming painfully clear across the board. This was always about NATO expansion. It was always about NATO expansion. That's not a Kremlin talking point. It's the truth. And we finally have a president who says, yeah, that's the truth. And Donald Trump says, I'm not doing that anymore. And somehow he's insulting people when he says that. I'm not playing that game anymore. We're going to get out of this nonsense. This war is coming to an end. Russia didn't start this war. Of course they didn't start this war. Everybody knows they didn't start this war. But we now have a president that says that's the truth. And if you operate with that as your foundational point of view, which is reality-based, fact-based, the only option available is to shut this thing down. Shut it down. But it's not just about shutting down Ukraine. See, I think people are missing the larger picture here. It's shutting down the West, the collective West, and their desire to use Ukraine as a vector to bring about the strategic defeat of Russia. What Donald Trump is saying is we're no longer interested in the strategic defeat of Russia game. And he's backed that up with things. He stopped, U.S. Cyber Command has been ordered to stop all offensive operations targeting Russia because Trump is trying to send the signal, we don't view you as the enemy anymore. See, anything that's going to move forward from this has to be predicated on the basis that the decades-old policy of singling out Russia for elimination, for destruction, is over, that America's not playing it. But America has to get the West to stop as well. I don't know how many times I have to tell people, had Kamala Harris won this election, we'd be midway to a thermonuclear war right now that would have happened by the summer of 2025, and we'd all be dead. Because that's a sickness of the Biden approach, sickness of her approach, the sickness of the establishment. My daughter went to Georgetown University. She just graduated last May with a master's degree in Southern Caucasus affairs. Good degree to have, in theory. All of her classmates, without exception, were either military foreign area officers or State Department, people, or maybe other government agencies pretend to be State Department people. We never know. But most of them were from the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, or the derivatives thereof. U.S. government programs, funded programs that were in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, trying to collapse a government, literally trying to collapse the government of Georgia Dream and impose an American-driven solution to a Georgian problem. They knew it. They all knew what they were doing. You want me to cry for these people when they lost their job? When your job was to go abroad and destroy a society? I'm sorry for the people who are going to lose their jobs. I'm sorry for the suffering they have. But you know what? You bought into a system, unquestioningly, that was going to lead us all down the path of hell. And so therefore, I'm not sorry. You're healthy. Go find new work. Find something constructive in society. But maybe you shouldn't have been a government employee, because what was that? Government employee sitting at a desk doing what? Did you really ask what you were doing? Did you really ask what you were trying to accomplish? The whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. The way the American system worked was a Ponzi scheme predicated on the absolute necessity to have chaos and anarchy, to have conflict in the world that justified the defense-centric spending of America. The military-industrial congressional complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about was alive and well, living and thriving. But it's a Ponzi scheme. It's never about to achieve stability. It's always about the next scam to get people to invest money up. And eventually, your crises bring you to a culminating point at the top, which is nuclear war, because there's nowhere else to go. That's where we were. We were at the tip of the Ponzi scheme. And thank God Donald Trump came in and went, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Screw it. Bam. Knocked the whole thing down. And it's going to be a beautiful thing to watch that Ponzi scheme collapse. I just had an interview with just a fantastic guy. His name was Konstantin Kevorkian. I think he's a journalist with Ukraine.ru. We had a long conversation as part of my new the Russia House program. But he talked about how in the 90s, because he kept saying, America, stop talking about 2014 and the American involvement there. Stop talking about 2004, 2005, the Orange Revolution, the American involvement there. He said this was in the 1990s. In the 1990s, he was part of the group of Ukrainians that were being lured in by USAID, taken on these junkets into the United States, where they would go to the White House, go to the Pentagon, get the briefings, and they were being coordinated by the American Ukrainian diaspora, the Banderists, working with the United States to inject the Banderist ideology back into Ukraine. For what purpose? To bring down that government, to install their own government, to create the situation we have today. It's been a process decades long in the making, and it almost worked. You want me to cry for the people that lost their jobs who were doing that? That's not how we define America. That's not how America should be defined.